The investor and exporter Forex window recorded a turnover of $53.02 million on Friday, following the Central Bank of Nigeria's Forex ban lift on 43 items. The CBN on Thursday lifted the ban on importers of 43 items restricted from accessing foreign exchange on its official platform. It disclosed this in a statement titled, "CBN Restates Commitment to Boost Liquidity in Forex Market," signed by the Director, Corporate Communications, Issa Abdul-Mumin. Figures obtained from the FMDQ on Friday revealed that there was no improvement in turnover on the official trading platform, as it recorded $53.02 million turnover from $60.3 million on Tuesday. The Naira, however, appreciated slightly as it exchanged at 764 Naira 86 kobo to a dollar from 766 Naira 70 kobo to a dollar on Thursday. The federal government has said Nigeria's power transmission capacity has increased to 8,500 megawatts. It disclosed this through the Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN, a federal government firm, stressing that TCN was currently capable of evacuating every quantum of electricity produced by power generation companies. Speaking on the sidelines of the just concluded biannual Joint Operations, Generation and Distribution Companies planning meeting in Abuja, the General Manager, Transmission Service Provider Ajiboye Oluwagbenga, said the government was not relenting in raising Nigeria's power transmission capacity. The meeting, which was hosted by the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, had senior officials of various power generation, transmission, and distribution companies in attendance. The power generation and distribution arms of the sector were privatized in November 2013 and managed by private investors, while the government was still fully in charge of the transmission segment of the industry. Reacting to concerns raised by GENCOs that TCN did not have adequate capacity to evacuate the quantum of power produced by electricity generation companies, Oluwagbenga debunked the claim. When asked to state the current capacity of the transmission company, he said the firm just did a simulation that showed that its capacity to transmit power had risen to 8,500 megawatts. And still, the federal government's Niger Delta Power Holding Company, Lagos, Ogun, and Oyo states have agreed on a bilateral trade to distribute 4,000 megawatts electricity to the extensive industrial and business clusters in Agbara and throughout Nigeria. This was revealed at Light Up Nigeria program, Agbara Business Roundtable in Lagos on Thursday. While speaking at the event, the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, NDPHC, Chiedu Ugo, explained that the primary objective of the initiative was to ensure a consistent, reliable, and cost-effective supply of electricity generated from its power plants. NDPHC is a wholly owned government company responsible for implementing the National Integrated Power Project, which aims to enhance electricity generation with associated electricity transmission and distribution infrastructure. With the evolving regulatory framework of the Nigerian electricity supply industry and the declaration of eligible customers, NDPHC said it had identified opportunities to revolutionize the industry through end-to-end solutions that increase electricity access for Nigerian homes and businesses and reduce the financial burden on federal government balance sheet. On his part, Vice President Kashim Shettima, who is also the Chairman, Board of Directors, NDPHC, gave the company a 6-month order to distribute the stranded electricity to interested customers across the country. Good to know you're still with us. Well, let's bring you all the stories, especially this good news that the federal government at the weekend announced that Nigeria's oil production has increased to about 1.7 million barrels per day, up from 1.1 million barrels per day recorded in August 2023. The Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Oil, Heineken Lupobiri, disclosed this in a session with journalists at his office in Abuja. He said the ministry has the sole agenda to increase crude oil production, and once production is increased, there will be more revenue for Nigeria, and that is the recipe to virtually all the problems the country has. Lukubiri said that Nigeria is very dependent on oil, and even its budget is always predicated on how many barrels of oil it produces, adding that although the non-oil sector is thriving, the nation needs to earn enough Forex. And the Nigerian Gas Association has called for the adoption of compressed natural gas as an alternative to premium motor spirit or petrol, saying it is 15% cheaper. The president of the association, Akachukwu Nwokedi, said this during a media briefing in Lagos. He said the federal government has to continue to make gas affordable, and the association supports CNG Train 7 because Nigeria has enough gas resources to achieve economic growth. Prices of petrol had seen a rise from around 185 naira per litre to almost 600 naira per litre in Lagos and its environs, and above 700 naira per litre up north. Nwokedi explained that reviewing the PIA would give rise to addressing issues such as multiple taxation, payment for gas and fees in dollars instead of naira, fiscal incentives, and others. The federal government has disclosed plans to unlock over $300 billion debt capital in the housing sector through a series of reforms in land administration and collaborations with stakeholders. The Minister of Housing and Urban Development, Ahmed Dangiwa, stated this during the two-day capacity building conference organized by the Real Estate Developers Association of Nigeria in Abuja. He said the reforms are part of the government's effort to enhance investment and finance opportunities for sustainable real estate projects and address the country's housing deficit. Dangiwa, who was represented by the Minister of State, Abdullahi Gwazo, said his ministry was ready to break all institutional, legal, and bureaucratic barriers that had hindered sector growth over the years. He outlined plans to amend the Land Use Act to streamline land administration, as well as reforms to key agencies like the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria and the Federal Housing Authority. He also underscored the government's commitment to encouraging more private housing investment. The Federal Capital Territory Command of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA, has seized 3,988.74 kilograms of assorted drugs with a monetary value of 80 million naira in the third quarter of 2023. The FCT commander of narcotics, Kabir Sakuwa, disclosed this in an interview on Monday in Abuja. Sakuwa, however, said that 134 suspected drug traffickers, peddlers, and abusers were also arrested in the same period. He named the assorted drugs cannabis sativa, cocaine, methamphetamine, tramadol, rohypnol, and diazepam. He said the major drugs seized by the operatives of the NDLEA was cannabis sativa, adding that many suspects were prosecuted and convicted in the same period. According to him, cannabis sativa seized within the same period are 3,861.8 kilograms, while cocaine intercepted was 0.038 kilograms. He said others include diazepam, which weighs 13.6 kg, tramadol weighing 105.12 kg, while methamphetamine weighs 3.02 kilograms, while which 0.009 kilogram, with pentazocine, which weighs 1.07 kilogram. Speaking on what the command had been doing to ensure the reduction of usage and trafficking of illicit drugs in the FCT, the NDLEA boss said the command had a balanced approach to drug control strategy. Telecommunication firms have issued fresh threats to withdraw unstructured supplementary service data service if banks do not pay 120 billion naira debt owed to them. According to the telcos, the issue has dragged on for too long and a court resolution might be needed since the banks do not seem to be ready to clear the debt. The chairman of the Association of Licensed Telecoms Operators of Nigeria, Benga Adebayo, disclosed this over the weekend while speaking to journalists. This new development is coming despite a recent resolution by the telcos and banks to settle the USSD issue that has been lingering for about 4 years. Adebayo highlighted that the matter is commercial and it is appropriate to withdraw the service. He, however, noted that political interference has ensured that telcos have not been able to enforce the commercial terms. Welcome back. Now let's bring you news from Africa, where the International Monetary Fund, IMF, last week urged sub-Saharan African policymakers to cut costly fuel subsidies and raise more in taxes, measures that may be hard to implement as governments grapple with tough spending choices amid high debt. The region has been hit by repeated economic shocks since 2020, from the COVID-19 pandemic to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and rising U.S. interest rates, putting cash-strapped, debt-laden government in a political and fiscal bind. However, the IMF's prescriptions set out at its annual meetings last week are often painful to administer. Countries from Ghana, which defaulted on its debts last year, to Kenya, which must pay back or refinance a $2 billion international bond before next June, have seen violent protests against tax hikes and subsidy removals. Meanwhile, the region's debt-to-GDP ratio, which has already doubled to 60% in the last decade, could rise 10 percentage points in the next 5 years if its fiscal trajectory does not change, according to a recent International Monetary Fund report. Many African governments are having to slash spending when the continent's booming population and climate change mean that demand for public money is growing. And the World Bank is in talks about a potential $1 billion loan to help enable South Africa to reform its energy sector as the country tries to overcome record power cuts that have crippled the economy. Marie-Francoise Nelly, the bank's director for South Africa, in an interview in Marrakesh, Morocco, said the loan, which would be directly to the government rather than to state utility Eskom, is under discussion. Declining to specify a time frame, she added that it is going to come very soon. South Africa is facing its worst power crisis, with Eskom's aging coal-fired plants often breaking down. Rolling power cuts have crimped economic growth while fueling private investment in renewable energy. In February, the South African government agreed to take on over 254 billion rand of Eskom's debt through a debt relief scheme, subject to conditions. The main condition was that the power utility would not be able to take on any new debt for 3 years unless approved by the country's finance minister. To the foreign scene, where the former chairman of the Bank of China has been arrested over suspicions of bribery and giving illegal loans. Liu Liang, chairman of the state-owned bank from 2019 to 2023, had resigned from his position in March this year. Weeks later, authorities announced Mr. Liu was facing corruption charges. The 62-year-old is one of the most senior bankers to be ensnared in President Xi Jinping's anti-corruption probe into China's $60 trillion financial sector. Well, with that, it's a wrap on Business Now. We will be back with more stories coming from the news world. Stay with us.